left, right.
Yo, what is up, my friends? Thank you for joining me on this episode of SipTalk. We are talking about, or disagreeing about whether or not this is the weakest generation. Everybody thinks the following generation is the weakest, and nobody thinks their own generation is the weakest. But I'm thinking if you were born in the last 30 or 40 years, you might be weak. That's my perspective. Listen on, here are talking points. Let me know if you agree or disagree, but I think we have it pretty damn easy. All right, I'll see you on the other end. This is Sip Talk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, it's good.
Cheers.
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 All right, that's a long pour. I think I just heard you crack a can. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll give you one guess as to what it was.
I have a feeling it's Bush Ice. Hello, everyone. This is Sip Talk, episode 143. My name is Justin Julio, out of my basement in New Jersey, joined by James, the Bosnator Boswell, out of Charleston, South Carolina. James is a philosopher, an referee,
Architect.
referee, accountant, and did I say philosopher? What am I missing here? And a bartender. James, man of many titles. He's here. He's not queer, and he's going to steer us in the right direction.
And he's drinking beer.
He's drinking beer. There you go. Either way, we're running a little late tonight. For those of you that are watching live, those of you guys that are watching us live, thank you for joining. Send us your questions tonight. We are talking about whether or not we are the weakest generation, which I believe we are. A little bit prior to the podcast going live, sounds like James doesn't think we are. Either way, I raced in, James, from the train. That's why we're running late. Trains suck, by the way. So I'm gonna pull out my little notebook, my handy dandy notebook with my notes, and so what we were just saying 40 seconds ago is that you got a new chair.
Yeah, this is how stupid I am. So I got the chair, and because I wanted to get something that, since I spend 90% of my day in front of my computer for work, I should get a better chair.
For those of you who can't see, James has like a Recaro Racing. This looks like he's driving like an Audi R8. And
it wasn't that expensive. It was like
it looks like there should be
$300.
It looks like there should be a seatbelt attached to this chair.
Yeah, that would be cool. But so I'm assembling the chair today, and I get it all put together, and it's not particularly difficult. You just follow the steps and take your time with it. And when I have it finally put together, one thing that I noticed is that it leans forward. So most chairs, when they rock, you can go back and forth like this. And I was like, who the hell designs a chair to lean forward?
Yeah, I know exactly what you did. You mounted the seat on the base backwards.
Yeah, it took me embarrassingly long to figure out that was the problem. That it wasn't the chair being designed stupidly. I was like, who in do Chinese people just want to lean further into their computer screen to work that much harder?
Oh my God. Do you know how many chairs that I have assembled in building a real estate office? At one point we had chairs to seat 86 people in the office. And for the most part, I assembled each and every one by hand. Yet I know exactly what you're talking about because I know how confusing it can be when assembling the chairs, which is the front side of the base.
Well, and the thing is, the instructions were basically in Chinese. Yes, they were written in English, but they might as well have been Chinese because that's who wrote them, was a Chinese person. And so it wasn't too bad, and just to double down on how stupid I am, when I finally realized that maybe I had the wheelbase bracket mounted wrong, I looked, and sure enough, stamped into the metal is the word
front. Yeah, I know. I've seen this. We have. So I was thinking, I won't say the name, but I'm gonna say the name. So Adam, for the last 3 years, bought his own chair, assembled it, and the armrests.
Mm-hmm.
so he can't sit like this. The armrests are actually backwards, so they don't extend forward. So the only way for him to put his arms back are like this, which is as awkwardly.
And it would take him like 5 minutes to switch the armrests.
Yeah, exactly. But in order for him to set his arms comfortably, he has to kind of do this weird Tyrannosaurus Rex like short arms.
Yeah.
Speaking of uncomfortable, though, speaking of bridge and tunnel, which we are not, but I am. Bridge. So you know the term bridge and tunnel. You know what that means?
No.
It's if you live in Manhattan, bridge and tunnel typically means like people from Long Island, Staten Island, outer boroughs. And for the most part, people in Manhattan kind of look down on the bridge and tunnel crowd. They're responsible for the traffic. They're the ones that come in and kind of go wild in the city because like it's new to them. And
so that's stupid to me because there's a shorter phrase for this that's also easier to understand.
Which is?
Commuter.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say commuter. Either way, it's called bridge and tunnel because to get to Manhattan, you got to go through a bridge or go through a tunnel. But I am now bridge and tunnel, and it fucking blows being bridge and tunnel because the commute is insane commute. It sucks. And then when you're in the tunnel, not so much the bridge, you're in the tunnel, there's no cell phone reception. And for whatever reason, the tunnels are the place where the tracks get fucked when we get like rain and bad, crazy, severe weather.
For some reason, like this isn't hard to think about where the tunnels are underwater.
Exactly. Well, that's the reason. But you figure in 2020, when we're like trying to figure out how we can manipulate the environment on Mars, we're fucked with our tunnels under the Hudson fucking River in New York.
Well, there's no rain on Mars.
Well, fair enough. Either way,
it'd be easier to build a tunnel there.
Today, speaking of rain, I was grabbed lunch in a bar today. I was trying to figure out what we were going to talk about, and I was thinking maybe we talk about like bar food or Guinness beer and how nobody seems to like Guinness beer. I like Guinness beer.
Guinness beer is the second most overrated beer, and it's close between Guinness and the beer that's tied for it.
Which is the beer? Is it Stella?
Yes. Stella? Yes, it is. Good job.
Yeah.
This is when I was bartending and I was hanging out with other bartenders. This was always a discussion that I like to have with them. I was like, "What's the most overrated beer? What's the most overrated liquor?" And like some of the bartenders would be like, "I'm not really sure," or whatever, and then I'd tell them Stella, and they're like, "Fuck, you're right." It's either they guessed Stella on the first time, or they went with Guinness, which I consider to be like tied for first.
Well, the issue is if you don't know about beer, right? Like if you walk into a bar and you're like, I want a whiskey, they're like, all right, so you don't know anything about whiskey, right? If somebody orders a whiskey, you're like,
I don't know. There's times where I go into a bar and I'll just order like a shot of whiskey because in the South, a shot of whiskey usually means bourbon.
Yes, but you should be asking for bourbon if you know what you're talking about, and also you don't want to get something really, really crappy.
Yes, I do. That's why I'm ordering a shot of whiskey.
Well, if that's your intent, then you're with intent. That's refined enough. All right. So look, we gotta get on topic. We gotta
answer the most overrated liquor one real quick.
All right, and then I promise whoever's listening, we're gonna talk about why you are a weak, crying baby in 2021. All right. So,
what's your most overrated liquor?
Overrated liquor. I feel like it's gonna be like a Grey Goose or something. So if I was
Grey Goose is slightly overrated. It's not the most overrated.
So what is somebody going to walk into a bar and they're going to order thinking they know their shit, but like they don't know their shit? That's kind of my thinking when it comes to.
Yeah, that's the right way to look at it. Is what's a liquor that markets itself and prices itself as super premium, but isn't. So like Grey Goose is a good answer there because it's marketed as like really high end.
I know, I got it. I'm all over it. Patron.
No, because Patron's actually decent tasting. It's overpriced for what it is, but it doesn't taste bad.
Give me the damn answer.
Crown Royal.
Really?
Yeah. Think about it. Have you actually tasted Crown Royal?
Yes, quite a bit.
Yeah, it's not very good.
Brian Rainey on Facebook also said Patron, but no, Crown Royal.
Patron is overrated, but it's not like something where like if I drink Patron, I'm like, this tastes decent. If I drink Crown Royal, I'm like, why the fuck did I even pay for that?
Well, that's kind of how I used to drink probably a handle of Doers a week, and Doers to me was kind of
But
like
isn't Doers isn't marketed as high end?
exactly, yeah. But you're right. Crown Royal to me is the same level as Doers. I actually like Doers a little better, and
Doers is better.
it's cheaper. So
Yeah,
but
but it's
Crown Royal
again,
is
it's
more
Crown.
expensive.
Right, Crown Royal is more expensive and tastes worse, but people think it's really good because it's got the name Royal in it and Crown, and it's marketed. It's got like a fancy velvet bag.
It comes with a velvet bag, purple velvet
Yeah.
bag. So if it's called Royal and it has a crown and it comes with a velvet bag, that's purple, and purple screams royalty, of course.
Right, and there are some bars that I worked in that charge like $10 or $11 a shot for Crown Royal, and like if you're paying $10 or $11 a shot for anything, it should be like a $30 or $40 bottle, and it should be actually good. Crown Royal actually is about a $30 bottle, but it tastes like a $12 bottle.
Yeah, but it tastes yeah, like Doers. All right, so let's. I feel like, although I was napping while I was stuck on the ground, I feel like we may have a bit of a disconnect here. Whereas I feel like we are in the weakest generation, and I look at my peers, and well, I got this house now in New Jersey, and we got a lot of work we got to do out here. But I've been doing a lot of this shit by hand. And people are like, "Wow, how did you figure that out?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just like the person that was going to install it probably like graduated high school and went to work shadowing somebody else, but they had a high school education and they didn't pass a calculus class. And I'm not calling them dumb. I don't think intelligent people are only people who can do calculus, but just like I look at doctors and I'm like, well, they don't have any superpowers, right? Like they just went to school long enough to be able to do this, but they're not diagnosing me with 168 issues. They're kind of diagnosing me like I'm telling what the symptoms are. They can look it up, and then there's 4 things that it could be. So point is,
so the common thread here is experience, less intelligence.
Yeah, but I don't think that there's a great difference in intelligence when it comes to different things. So I managed.
There is, but
but that's actually where I will give certain like contractors and people who you wouldn't think to be intelligent an upper hand, where like you're faced with an issue, and rather than say, well, this we can't figure it out, they managed to figure it out.
Well, and that's where the experience comes in, is like you could probably figure it out, but it would take you longer because you haven't seen the problem before. And
that's where I recognize where I run into issues with doing things. But then I do my research and learn from people who have figured that out. And typically I will learn from several people by watching YouTube videos, and I just don't want one person's perspective on it.
Well, and those are good strategies, but there are some things that like it's pretty hard for someone, even if they're intelligent, to do well, just because you don't have the tools available to you. Like a year and a half ago when I was rebuilding my computer, there was a problem that I ran into with like the CPU overheating, and I couldn't figure it out because I was wiring.
You didn't have the right screwdrivers. You didn't have the Torx screwdrivers.
No. I had all the tools that I needed, and I had everything wired up correctly and everything. And what it turned out to be was the liquid cooling unit that I was trying to install had gone bad. Like the motor was gone or something, like it had burned out. And so I'm installing this unit properly, but the unit itself is burned out. So I don't know that. So I finally got to the point where like, I can't fix this. So I brought it to a shop, and they're like, yeah, that unit's burned out. You're going to need to get a new one. So that's not something I would have been able to easily find out on my own because I don't have the tools to test an individual part.
Yeah. Well, look, I feel like we're going in a different direction than than I want to, but I think we're on the same page here. I think we're very much on the same page. Are you?
Well, here's the analogy.
Are you tearing the CPU out of your computer right
now? No. So I've got a little Wi-Fi antenna that's like jammed into my desk, and it fell out. So I just jammed it back in there.
All right.
Here's what I want. Here's a way that we can dovetail. So just about experience and skill sets. So you think that this generation is super weak. And I don't think that it's necessarily, I think the comparisons that you're making are selective, because this new generation might not have the ability to do some of the things that we do well as we can, but there are other things that this generation does much better than us. And we don't see that because they're not really relevant
to us.
Probably the biggest one is being able to navigate online spaces and new technology better than we can.
Well, I think you're speaking from your personal perspective, but I think I navigate the online spaces pretty well. But the issue is keeping up with it. You're not a social media person, so you dive in at any point in time and you have to learn a whole new language. Right. And I have kind of learned the language as it's progressed.
But it's still, I think that there, and again, like, you might be good at it, but you have to take yourself out of it and think people in our generation, take our age, and I would say plus or minus 5, I think on aggregate, kids that are like between 10 and 20 years old or whatever, on aggregate, are much better at navigating through these online spaces and understanding what's going on in the world today in the way that it's presented to them better than we are.
Fair enough. Let me ask you a question. Do you think with enough time and resources that you could recreate, I don't want to say Facebook because it's a little more complex, but let's say Instagram from a coding aspect?
Could I?
Yes. And then
if you gave me infinite time to learn coding, sure. But I would.
But and then you break it down. Do you think you could build a computer? And I'm not saying build the processors, but basically put the parts together for a computer. And then if you were to look at the circuit boards within the computer, have a basic understanding of what they are.
I mean, I already know how to do that.
Okay. Do you think
build my own computers?
You think somebody who's 19 years old today could code a simple program and have a basic understanding of a more complex program and put together a device and understand the components of a device?
I think that the 19-year-old is going to have a better understanding of coding at age 19 than somebody. You can't compare someone who's 19 to someone who's 35 or 40, because I've got 15 or 20 years on these people. So that experience is going to be worth more. But me at 19, my understanding of coding at age 19, probably worse than the average 19-year-old today. My understanding of computer hardware, probably better, but that's because I grew up on computers and I built my own computers basically since I was a kid. So that's not a fair comparison.
All right.
Well,
it's okay. So outside of the technology realm, I was thinking, kind of in gathering my thoughts today before we went live, while I was taking some notes, is that society, kind of humanity, for it to grow, each successive generation needs to do better by the following generation, needs to make the following generation better off, which therein lies the issue. Whereas if you're eliminating the hardship that you grew up in to any degree, you are producing a society for the following generation to grow up in, which has less hardship.
Right, but
so sure,
you need to make sure that you're defining things correctly, because hardship can be both a good and a bad thing, and you can't say that hardship is only good or only bad. So some hardship holds you back because you have to struggle harder just to make progress, and then some hardship makes you a stronger person because you learn to persevere through adversity.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is people who grow up in adversity learn how to persevere. Whereas, yes,
but you can't. But hardship is not exclusively a good thing to go through.
No, I'm not saying that it is, but the learning the ability to persevere is an important quality.
I want to respond to "It's Gorgeous." She's saying that this generation is more resilient as it pertains to careers. We're more worried about stability, whereas, and I think you can definitely see a trend going from like the older generations than ours to us to like whatever generations in between us and whatever the teenagers are right now, like you can see a pretty straight line decline in terms of like career loyalty and company loyalty and willing to stay with one job for a long time.
Well,
50
yeah, I
years
mean-
ago, you got a job and that was your job for life.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look at our parents and especially the generation before our parents.
Hmm.
You got one job and you worked it for life, which is why pensions and things like that made sense and worked. But today, people work a job for a year or 8 months or 3 years and abandon ship and continually try to upgrade.
So do you know why that is?
No, paradox of choice, something along those lines.
I don't think so. My view as to why 50 years ago, like my mother worked one job her entire life. My father also the same thing. Like their adult life. Like,
but I also think that there was less opportunity.
well, so here's the reason why I think more people change careers more often. Is 50 years ago, large companies or employers did a better job of taking care of their employees. Wages were higher, benefits were better, and companies were much less likely to lay off employees during any like a small downturn or whatever. Like you didn't have companies just like immediately tighten the books and lay off people. They would keep employees on through various business cycles.
I definitely think
so. Loyalty went both ways.
I agree with you. I agree with you that way. I completely agree with you that way. That businesses were much more loyal to their employees, and there is considerably fewer businesses today that are concerned with the people that have built the business.
So the reason why people leave work is really the 3 reasons. One is they can get paid more somewhere else. 2, the environment in which they're working becomes untenable. Either they've got a terrible boss or they just hate the work. Or 3, they have some kind of life circumstance change. Either they have to move or like they have kids and they don't have as much time to put towards work, those kinds of things. And so I think the one that we're seeing more than anything else is like, since employers are offering less money to retain employees, you have this like right now, it's better for you to change jobs every 2 or 3 years because companies will pay more to bring on someone new than to hire somebody else, than to raise wages for someone that they already have. Like, that's why I changed jobs in the last year. Is I was with my firm for about 3 years and didn't see as much in terms of salary growth as I wanted. And then my brother offered me the opportunity to take this job. It was a 33% raise.
But getting back to topic here, is that making people stronger or weaker?
Neither.
I think, and that's why I feel like we're a bit off topic with what you're sharing. And
I'm trying to draw comparisons to the way that generations approach things. And I don't think that it's fair to just call this newest generation weak, because on what grounds are you assessing them as weak?
Well, I think that, just like we said, adversity basically breeds a population that has to push through adversity, kind of like almost like a Darwinistic approach. So, when there is adversity, for people to grow, they have to press through the adversity. And without adversity, people aren't working as hard. They're not as courageous. They're not as hardworking. And I feel like what we're doing with humanity is creating a softer and softer place, living space for people to live in. And I think, actually, to a degree, that is the purpose of humanity. But that could also lead to our biggest downfall, is that we create an issue like climate change or something like that we're just completely incapable, because we're all just fucking comfortable as shit. And think about like World War II, where we had like rations and like right now, people don't want to fucking not water their lawn to conserve water. Whereas back in the day, people had to like live on rations because we needed to.
Okay, so there's a
allocate
lot
those
going on there.
resources. Yeah, all right.
So
But I think you get my overarching point.
yeah. So the first one, in terms of like people not wanting to forego water in their lawn, or more topically, people refusing to get vaccinated or wear masks or anything, has to do more with a societal shift that we've seen in the last 70 or 80 years, especially towards a more individualistic approach. Because if you look at other countries, you look at countries like Japan that have a much more societal, communal approach to things. You'll get people to do things and make sacrifices for the common good. And it's really gone the opposite direction in the United States. So that's not so much an entitlement or adversity thing. Like in terms of the origins of like our more individualistic approach and how that's accelerated in the last 50 years, I don't really know where that comes from. I'm gonna my thought is that it has to do something with the baby boomers, and I'll come back to that. But when it comes to adversity and hardship and everything, like sure, there's benefits to having to push through unpleasant circumstances, but at the same time, those circumstances are also holding you back. And so you talk about how every generation should try and leave things in a better place for the next generation. Well, one of the consequences of that is that the next generation is going to face less quote unquote adversity than you did.
Well, that's my point. And I feel like with building humanity that way, we're creating less and less adversity, and adversity creates stronger people.
Yeah, but the thing is, it also holds them back by not having to face adversity in the ways that we did. The younger generation is free to pursue things that we didn't have the opportunity to pursue.
Okay, cool. But you can pursue your art career where you want to paint ponies, but that doesn't make you a stronger person. And the topic is, are we the weakest generation? So because you don't have to cut down trees to burn fucking logs in your wood oven, now you can paint ponies. That doesn't make you a stronger person because you're pursuing your passion of painting horses. Okay, that's the point that I'm making. And we can talk. You want to read Brian Rennie's quote?
Brian says, "You can't call them weak because they understand their worth, unlike many of us. Finding someone or a company who is willing to pay you what you feel you're worth is a level of adversity, in my opinion." I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not calling somebody weak. I'm not calling somebody weak for changing careers, and that's why I said when we were talking about that, we were kind of getting off topic. But
I think
hang on. Sorry, because you touched on this, and I made a note that I wanted to talk about is that right now I feel like what people's greatest cause is self, right? So in the past we've had to overcome things as
hi Lisa, since she's only going to be here for a second.
No, but the quote that I have here is that we lack greater cause than self. So in the past, we've had to rally behind ideas or rally behind World War II, for example, or whatever else. But now it's all about the individual and the self.
Well, yeah, and I want to try and better understand where that comes from. But I want to respond to one other point that you made about global warming and everything, and how like if we get too comfortable, we're just not going to deal with global warming because we don't know how to handle adversity. I think that is completely misunderstanding the situation. Right now, do you know what generation is fighting hardest for reforms to mitigate global warming?
Hopefully the most recent generation.
The youngest generation is the ones who, like, if you look at polling data sorted by age and see like what are the greatest threats to our like to us right now, like the younger the generation, the higher they rank global warming. You know who's opposing it is the people that are 60, 70, and 80 who don't give a shit because they're old and they'll die before it really becomes a problem for them. Well, and guess who also makes all the policy decisions?
Well, I don't think that they don't support change because they're just going to, because they know they're going to be dead before it's an issue. I actually don't. I think they believe that it's a non-issue. I don't think that they're like, this is an issue, I'm going to ignore it because I'm going to die by then. I think that actually, for the same reason that older people don't believe in gay marriage or don't believe in equal rights for races or women or whatever else, it's because that's what they were raised in. So that the foundation of their life is kind of based in things that they can't they can't even understand or comprehend it being challenged. So, and yes, you're right that right now the people in their 50s, 60s, 70s are the ones that are making the policies, and that's slow. They're being canceled and they're being pushed out. And the youngest generation are the ones that are championing the cause.
You know what? I want to address something else that you just brought up that I think actually that's really important, which is you can talk about the racism and discrimination that was really normalized for people that are 50, 60, or 70 when they were growing up, and how much of a societal shift we've had against that, and how much more accepting and open the youngest generation is. Sometimes they take it a little bit too far where they're too accepting of things, and I'll grant that point. But the overall, that's them eliminating adversity, not only for themselves, but for like these marginalized groups that are discriminated against. And like, I think that that's a really good thing, that we've got this younger generation that's more sensitive to the causes of oppressed.
Yes, I think at times that could be good, but back to what I said a second ago is that people are championing self and not greater cause, and people aren't looking at, and people are spending too much time looking at other groups as other rather than we're all in this together. And that's the biggest issue I have with any of the causes that are happening now, is they're all agenda driven and they're not comprehensive, not comprehensively designed. But that, again, we're tangent to the point that I want to be discussing about how, and I'll read a quote. I don't actually know who said it, but the quote is, "Hard times create strong men, good times create weak men create hard times." And I feel like, we've had a generation before us that had it worse off than we did, who made it very soft for us.
I don't think that the boomers actually had it all that hard. If you were born in the 50s, think about growing up, being born in 1955. So your parents went through hard times. They went through the Great Depression. They went through World War II. But if you were born in 1955, your early childhood was during probably the greatest economic expansion ever seen in this country. The 60s were largely a continuation of that until the late 60s.
Okay, but hold up, back up though. So that's great. The economy is good, but your parents don't talk to you, right? They lock you out of the house. Your parents don't talk to each other. So socially, things aren't great. So yeah, I get it. Economically, things are good, but I don't think that things were great.
Well, I think that what you saw in like the late 60s and early 70s was a backlash against the stifled social order that these kids saw their parents go through, and they said, we don't want that.
Completely agreed. The speed and the acceleration that was caused by whatever catalyst happened, that caused, I guess the catalyst is whatever catalyst it was that caused that in the late 60s, I feel like is very similar to whatever we're going through now, where gender pronouns are more confusing, than the fucking alphabet.
I don't think it's even remotely comparable in terms of scale.
But I think what happened in speed, whereas a couple would meet, basically, if you were a man, you met a woman in the 40s or 50s, and you had one date, for the most part, that was your soulmate. Like you were going to be together. Whereas in the late 60s, you were sleeping with somebody else every other day. You were trying out different drugs, and if 1964, your hair did not exceed your ears, right?
As a male.
1969, you were not socially accepted if you didn't have long hair as a male. Now, what I'm saying is that speed for what changed in society then is very, very similar to what's happening now in terms of gender fluidity and everything that's happening that I can't wrap my head around. But
Neither
also,
can I, honestly.
but also, I'm not 17 years old, or I'm not 21 years old, so I'm not in the thick of it. So, for example, somebody who's 40 years old in 1969 is gonna say, "What the fuck is going on here?" And they're gonna be the square old man, right?
So what's really you just brought up a really interesting point that I want to go into more, which is that I think you can draw you can every society since the dawn of time, since the dawn of civilization, every generation has shat on the younger generation.
Yes,
It's
and we've
like
talked about this quite a bit. We've talked about this quite a bit, but I'm shitting on our own generation and giving props to the generation before us, saying that they had more adversity than we do. You can lose a fucking baseball season or soccer season and still get a trophy.
so I thought we were talking about the generation younger than ours, not our own.
Well, I'm talking about both. I'm going both ways. I'm looking at the generation younger than us and our I'm looking at it backwards rather than looking forward. So yeah, you can shit on the generation forward from you. But what I'm saying is look over your shoulder, bro. Like look over your shoulder and say, "Hey, they had it tougher than we did."
And my
And
question is, did they really?
well, I feel like today people create a lot of their own drama, whereas people previous to us, prior to us, had enough drama. They didn't have to create their own drama.
Well, you know what my answer is to the cause of that is.
Social media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hold on. Well, so one other thing that's really important is, and I don't think I haven't mentioned this yet, but I think it's important to discuss is that our generation and the generation that's younger than ours are, in terms of psychological and psychiatric medication, are the most medicated generations.
Very, very valid point. Very valid
And
point.
like, I was talking with my mom about, she had a student that was doing student teaching at a high school in Albany, New York, and it was maybe like fourth graders that she was teaching, right? And she was talking about how many of her fourth graders were on like powerful antipsychotics and powerful and other powerful psychiatric meds, and like these are and like or like benzodiazepines at age 9, or like
teaching zombies. She was teaching zombies.
And the thing is, these psychiatric drugs have long-term lasting effects in both brain development and physiological changes. And by introducing these drugs to kids, like, kids haven't changed from 100 years ago. What's changed is how we deal with them. And the problems that kids that had 50 years ago still exist today, exactly the same. And the only thing is, now we medicate them instead of pushing the problems through some other channel.
Well, look, kids are learning machines. What kids do is, from birth, they soak up information around them and then translate it through what they already have been exposed to. That's it. You soak up information around you and then translate it to what you've already been exposed to.
Well, and they're constantly trialing things. They see somebody else do something, so they try it and they see if it works for themselves. Kids imitate all the time.
But until your brain gets to a certain age, and it's between, I think, like 18 and 23, does it really stop that absorption and learning phase? But
it significantly decelerates.
But kids are basically like effectively like sponges. Like they're constantly soaking up and squeezing out and soaking up and squeezing out up until whatever age. So the fact that you're just going to like medicate a kid is really going to slow down the soak up process and basically make it less permeable, and also slow down the squeeze out phase. So they're not you're just changing the brain behavior of children. And
let me just illustrate with how wild this is. This is anecdotal and this is just from my own personal experience, but like, if I start seeing a girl and she's not on some kind of like med, like either like Adderall or a benzo or like some kind of antipsychotic or whatever, I'm like, this is weird. Like, it's so hard for me to find like an unmedicated chick. It just seems like everybody is medicated. I'm sure this is true for dudes too. I just don't date dudes.
Damn. All right. That's very true. That's very true. I don't know. I've not dated. I've not had serious relationships with women that I know about their what would you call it, psychological drug,
psychiatric meds, whatever.
Yeah,
but like think about how many women you've met that are on some form of psychiatric medication.
I don't get that deep. Although Rain Man, one of Rain Man's first questions for women are you on any what's the question? Are you taking any prescription medication? So that was very Rain Man. Rain Man's a Tom Cruise movie from the 80s where
I don't remember that line from the movie.
It's Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. And Dustin Hoffman, he sees a girl that he likes, and he says, "Are you, what prescription medication are you taking?" Something along those lines, and that's just kind of common talk for him because the world he lives in.
Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to make is that it's so common for people to be medicated for all these things, and I think that you want to talk about adversity or whatever. Like, I'm not a mental health expert, so you can throw all this stuff away, but so many people medicate their problems away instead of trying to address them head on. And there's some people who they legitimately do need the medication. I get it. But you can look at the explosion of medications and the percentage of the population. All these problems existed 50 or 100 years ago, and people somehow got by without these medications.
Yeah, and I think grew to be stronger people. But
arguably so.
Let me share a couple of notes that I wrote down. People create their own drama, but who's seeing tough times right now and overcoming them? People are creating
everybody.
Their own, no, I don't think so. I think people are creating their own drama, but they're not getting past it. I think they're just kind of existing in that drama, and I think you see a lot of that on social media. People just existing in drama constantly. I don't think anybody's achieving championship above that drama. I think they
sampling bias.
Well, fair enough.
There's so many people out there that are going through things privately and don't share it, or just aren't going through drama whatsoever. The reason why you're saying this is because the people that are posting this are the ones who are getting the most attention.
Well, also, yeah, so, and those posts garner attention, but also,
right. So obviously,
hang on, hear me out, because I want to share these thoughts, and then we can break them down. But also, with social media, everybody is special, and everybody is going to have their 15 minutes of fame at some point in the future. Everybody has their own webpage. Everybody feels special in their own way, and what we're doing with these 7th place trophies is making everybody feel special, and that nobody feels like nobody. And a lot of times what you need to understand is that for the greater good and in your part in society can oftentimes be nobody, and that you have to understand that you are often nobody when it comes to many issues.
So hold on, I just want to draw another analogy here, because I'm agreeing with you, but I would say that like 50 or 60 years ago, the older generation would have lodged that same criticism against the younger generation and used TV of like, everybody wants to be on TV. And like, you guys just care about being on TV, so you're going to do whatever to get on there. And so now, like, replace TV with social media, and it's the exact same sentence.
Not everybody could be on TV 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now, everybody has their own webpage.
Right, but you understand what I'm seeing the similarities here, right?
Let me finish my thoughts here. What is courage in 2021?
Well, hold on. Let's not in 2021. Just say, what is courage?
Well, okay, but what is courage, and then what is courage in 2021? Is it standing up for the current group that that's protesting on social media, whether you're wrong or right? And I'm not, that we have different groups that are protesting for different reasons, but joining that group, does that make you courageous because you're part of a group that's protesting? And hear me on the rest of this. Comparatively, by contrast, our poorest population today lived like kings did 100 years ago.
Oh, well, yeah,
and
that second point
probably,
is I want
Probably
to talk
way-
about the courage thing because it's got me thinking.
All right, hold up. But what my point is that our poorest population live better than kings did 100 years ago. They don't have to sweat in the summertime. They don't have to freeze in the wintertime.
Well, not
They
the
have-
absolute poorest. If you're homeless, you're not doing so great.
If you're homeless, but also if you're homeless, there's a lot of systems, especially in the United States, that you can live and you can be fed. And if you're living in a shelter where there's hot showers and there's iced drinks and there's clean linens in 2021, kings didn't have this stuff. Iced drinks, air conditioning.
Yeah,
You
you
didn't-
used
you
to have to
didn't
cut a
really-
block out of the lake.
Yeah, you didn't have that shit 150 years ago. So, and 150 years is not that long. So what I'm saying, the point that I'm making is that things are pretty soft these days. So when we try to define courageousness, it's which cause are you championing when you're
So
just
let's back
joining
up.
an
What's the
existing cause?
definition of courage? Because we need to understand what courage is.
Well, look,
Define it.
Okay. I think it's extending yourself into discomfort for some greater good. And I feel like comfort kills courageousness. Okay. So I'll simplify that statement. Creating personal discomfort for a greater good.
I think one other thing that's important to add, because I think your definition is pretty good. I would add that for an act to be courageous, it has to carry some risk.
Risk is exactly the word.
It has to carry risk, and also the risk reward cannot be in favor of the reward. You have to have some considerable risk to your own person, be it like financial, physical, reputation. You have to carry some kind of risk, and there can't really be much of a reward if you succeed. Courage is a largely selfless act that carries a risk that you will bear.
But where I feel now is that courageousness is people are calling fucking 1,000 signs I pass every day saying you're a hero if you wear a mask. Like, what is fucking heroicism in 2021? Like, what's the differentiation?
You want to say that are we cheapening the term? Sure.
But yes, and that's my point, is that we have cheapened this courageousness aspect. So if you walk out the door and you're like, I'm a hero, I put on a fucking mask. Fuck you, you're not a hero. You're just fucking doing your daily duty as a fucking person. You're not a hero, jackass. You didn't do shit. You didn't do shit. You just lived up to expectation. You're not a hero for wiping your ass. All right. You're a piece of shit if you don't wipe your own ass, but you're not a hero for wiping your ass. You're just a regular person. And if you don't wipe your own ass, you're a piece of shit. So you don't wear a mask. You want to stand in an elevator or a subway. That can make you a piece of shit. All right. I'm not having the mask argument. I'm actually taking the liberal perspective on this one, saying that if you don't wear a mask, you're a piece of shit. But it doesn't make you a hero. It doesn't make you a hero for wearing a mask.
So, well, yeah, but that's the whole
Bro,
cheapening and glorifying ordinary acts.
We don't have a draft in 2021. Do you think people that you went off to war and that was your duty 60 years ago, 40 years ago? That was your duty. They didn't look at those people even as heroes. They were at points defined as heroes for going off to war, but that was also, it wasn't heroic, it was duty. So heroicism was then one level above that.
Well, it depends, because in World War II, I think the soldiers that returned from World War II were treated as heroes for the most part.
After the fact, yes, upon returning, but upon leaving, that was their duty.
Yeah,
right?
You know how many of them didn't want to go? A fucking lot.
But that's the point, is you look back and you're like, you know what, bro? That was very heroic what you did. That was very courageous what you did. Now, when they left, you were like, this is what you got to do. Now, they're like, hey, honey, put on your mask and you'll be a hero. Fuck you, bro.
Yeah, you're cheapening the term to motivate behavior.
And that's my point. So that's where I'm saying, people, you're cheapening the term, but how can you call a hero in 2021 somebody that slaps a fucking piece of cloth over their mouth, right? And how does that make somebody in 2021 strong? How are you strengthening people by calling them heroes for putting a fucking cotton mask over their lips?
I don't know. I think we've beat this conversation to death. Like,
but Go ahead.
Yeah, like
Because I've kind of taken off a little bit, and I gotta actually step back and cool myself off because I'm a little pissed off of the fact that the direction that we're going right now.
I think you need to divide this conversation into two ideas. The first is like trying to motivate people to act in altruistic ways. And wearing a mask, although it's a very small thing to do, it is an altruistic gesture that you're
Completely.
and
But
so a
is
lot of
it
people don't
heroic?
want to do it. No, but again, this is somebody out there thought that using these words would help motivate more people to make altruistic gestures. And I don't think that anybody of sound mind goes out in the world, puts on their mask and says, "This makes me a hero." And if they do,
But I
then
actually, but I
they're not
just,
of sound mind.
but I
So
disagree with you. And this is where, you're not a big fan of Elon Musk, but I'm like, this is a dude that's extended himself and risked personal bankruptcy and is doing something for this, like I don't necessarily think that he's like Jesus, but I actually think he's doing some cool stuff at his own risk. And you may disagree with me, but it's his money and it's his companies, and he's extending himself and his empire to do cool-ish stuff.
I'm going to choose not to engage on this one.
Well, look,
The second one is like when you look at actual heroism, like I think most, if not all people, can look and see the difference between a person who wears a mask every single day and a firefighter who pulls somebody out of a burning car.
Well, yes, and we're not talking like a Batman mask. So,
Yeah.
but I don't. I want to share a few more notes because we got like 7-8 minutes left, and I want to get through the rest of my notes to and then we can break them down. But I have some notes saying that now we don't celebrate courage, but we uphold victimhood.
I agree with the second part, but I don't think it's a we thing. I think, again, this is a sampling bias based on exposure to social media.
Fair enough, but social media is something that we all have exposure to. So that's the sample, and that's
yeah,
the
but
audience.
in terms of rewarding courage, I think we do. It's just that it's hard to find genuine examples of it right now.
Well, all right. So the next note I have here is a Martin Luther King Jr. quote that we shouldn't be judged by the color of our skin, but the content of our character. And I feel like we have lost value in character, and we're now as kind of assigning people as groups and beliefs, and that if you belong to a certain group, you should be celebrated for that group's beliefs, but not by the content of your own character. So that people believe that they belong to a group, but they may not act that way. And they're defining their character by the group's identity, but not actually by what their character is. And that's we have friends that tell us all the time, I'm actually a really smart person. You don't know this. Like, well, your actions would indicate otherwise. So
stupid is as stupid does.
The point is that when somebody tells you they're a really honest person, but then you witness what they do and you witness their deception, they're not an honest person. Like, at the end of the day, their character and their actions are what we should be judging them by, not by what groups they belong to.
Well, that's why generally you should avoid trying to describe yourself in such terms. Just do things and let people judge your character based on your actions and make your actions good.
But that's easy for us to discuss, but we don't. There's not a lot of that happening right now.
Yeah, but in terms of I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there too, because the whole like group identity thing that's always existed. I think when you started off, the thing that jumped into my head was the concept of winning and results oriented thinking. where it doesn't matter how you get to where you want to end up as long as you end up there. And that's really kind of dangerous to go down that path, because you can achieve anything if you're willing to make enough sacrifices, and you can achieve even more if you're willing to cause harm to others in your pursuit of doing so.
Well, here's a note.
But you shouldn't do that.
Sure, fair enough. Here's a note that I have. There was a conversation that I caught part of this morning on the news about how they wanted to remove this Thomas Jefferson statue because he owned slaves. And when I heard that instantly, I thought, there were black people back in the day, not many of them, who owned slaves. And then my mind instantly...
But we don't have statues of them.
Okay, fair enough. But they also weren't presidents. So then my mind went to the cancellation of anybody who's made a mistake in their past. So
I don't think I think that's an exaggeration.
Well, I think that a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this podcast, somebody could take it out of context, or oftentimes even in context, and the fact that we're discussing them, or for the most part, you and I are having a conversation where we may not even believe in the point that we're making. And this is a lot of the issue that David and I have, is that I'm trying to feel out and pound out my perspective and my opinion on something, but I'm trying to pound it out, and he was hitting back with like a tennis racket. And I was like, look, help me sound this opinion out. But the fact that I'm taking an opinion that's an unpopular opinion and trying to figure out where it has grip, and then maybe finding out that it doesn't, but airing out that entire opinion could set us up to be shit on or canceled.
Yeah. So two things. One, I know that Rosh is pushing us towards a topic, which I think we're just going to have to address on Thursday. But to come back to your idea about like the statues and everything, I think the idea of having statues to people that were once revered, that now that we know more about the life that they led, a statue is naturally going to be glorifying for whoever that statue is made of.
Sure,
and
but
so,
back in 1850, when they put up that statue, who was saying we shouldn't have put up the statue?
Nobody, because people still own slaves.
Okay, so now, in retrospect, this statue is to a degree a part of history. Now, it's not also a defeated part of history, right? Like, it wasn't challenging to the U.S. I have mixed feelings on that. I don't know exactly how I feel, but what I was thinking when I heard this was, we had this guy who was president, and he was doing what everybody else was doing back then, and it wasn't right. But
I hate doing this, but it's really, I think it makes sense here. Is if you put up a statue of Hitler in Germany and say, this is part of our past, and this person had a major impact on this country.
But Hitler was defeated. Nobody went to war and beat Thomas Jefferson. He existed and passed away, and then 100 years later, people have issue with something that he did. That wasn't his agenda. That wasn't his agenda.
It doesn't matter. You can look and say, we shouldn't be glorifying a person like this.
Well,
because
but in 50 years, when nobody eats meat because killing other animals is bad, and you have James Boswell, who was a celebrated co-host on a podcast, and the podcast still exists, should we be tearing that down from YouTube because he was a meat eater? Because that's the very
false analogy.
I think it's the fact that right now you are killing other animals or hiring people to kill other animals for you. And in 50 years, that's going to be frowned upon. James, who wore leather skin jackets and fur
I don't
jackets.
have any leather jackets.
Okay. But you see where I'm going with this.
But I think that this is either a false analogy or a slippery slope fallacy, because
I'll give you some slippery slope, but I won't. I'm not going to say it's a slippery slope fallacy. I think that there's some traction on that slope. I want to. Oh, fuck, we're out of time. All right, so, but my point was ripping people apart about past mistakes that in that time were perfectly acceptable.
But I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that we're ripping apart people who did things that were acceptable in their time. I think we're looking at things. There's a dividing line of what did you do in your time, and should we be glorifying you as a person for it? And you can look at people that are still alive that might have done regrettable things, and there's a camp that have atoned for their mistakes, and there's a camp that haven't, and you see the differential treatment there.
All right, we out. Adios.
Thank you for joining us. If you have not already, please subscribe. Or if you're not down to subscribe for whatever reason that is, interact with this podcast some other way. Like it, share it, comment. Anything you do helps us out, and I will truly, I already am so grateful. Thank you again. See you next time.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.